Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Remember to Live podcast. It's your host, Corrine, and I have a very special guest today, Morgan Adams. She is a transformative, holistic sleep coach. And I have to say, when I learned to sleep and rest, it was a game changer in my life. And so I feel like everyone should have a sleep coach. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. So to get started, let's just take a moment to get present, take a breath, make sure we're here with each other. Remembering to live, a lot of that is about showing up to the moment that we're in. So I'm very excited to share this moment with you. All right. So I always start out the podcast by asking one particular question, and that is, how do you live a life and how do you live one well from your perspective?
Yeah, well, living a life well, I think, starts with living in authenticity
Mhm.
and being true to yourself and also respecting your own timeline. I feel like a lot of times society is rushing us to these mileposts,
Yeah.
right? You got to get married by the time you're this, you got to have kids, you got to climb this career ladder by, all these extraneous things that we're supposed to do at a certain time. And I feel like when you can kind of release that and do things according to your own timeline, I think you're going to live a happier, more fulfilled life overall. And I also feel like I try to adhere to this philosophy, and I don't know who said it, but leave people better than you found them.
Mm.
Essentially, what that means is
Mhm.
like within every interaction that you have with somebody, they should feel better having left your presence than they did before they were in front of you. Right. And
Yeah.
so I try to live my life in accordance to that. I mean, I'm sure I fail sometimes in my daily life, but that's just something I always keep in the back of my head as sort of like a guiding principle to live by.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the mantras that I try to live by as well. And I think one of the things I realized probably later into my adulthood than I would hope looking back is it's hard to show up when you don't feel good, right? And I think for so long, I mean, I was a single mom. I had multiple jobs raising my children. I didn't get much sleep or rest. I probably spent decades on like 4 hours of sleep a night. And I thought that that was my normal, right? I thought I was okay until my body no longer allowed me to work at that pace. And I had to learn how to get real rest. And then I realized, oh, I've been missing out on what I should feel like in how much more I can show up and how much more I can enjoy life. And just my overall quality of life changed when I understood not only sleep, but the multiple forms of rest and how to make sure I prioritize them. So tell me a little bit more about how you got on this path of this journey of becoming a sleep coach and helping people transform their sleep, therefore, in my book, transforming their lives.
Yeah. Oh, I love your story. Well, for me, my journey with sleep sounds very, very different from yours. But let's compare and contrast here, because
Yeah.
mine started maybe 20 years ago when I had a really bad bout of insomnia
Mm.
where I could not fall asleep. We call it sleep onset insomnia. Basically, that just means you have trouble falling asleep. I would lie in bed 1 to 2 hours most nights. Sleep would never come. After a couple months of this, I decided I'm going to go to my doctor. I need help. I need
Yeah.
to figure out a way out of this. And I went to my doctor and I was given Ambien. And during
Okay.
that time of my life, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep. And so my currency was pills, drugs,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought nothing of it. Yeah, sure, I'll take this pill, whatever, no biggie. And, the Ambien did help me get to sleep more quickly, but I had a lot of side effects the next day. We could even touch more on that later, but I just kind of mustered through it. And, then 8 years later, I met a guy who is now my husband. And he said to me, when you take those pills at night, you kind of act like a zombie and it freaks me out.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's not good. I need to stop taking these pills." So, I did what I don't recommend other people do, and that is just to take yourself off a medication. If you're on a medication and you want to come off of it, whether it's a psychiatric medication or something else, it's really best to consult with your prescribing provider and get some direction on how to do it properly. Well, I just went rogue. I
Oh,
didn't know any
yeah.
better.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, because I have a lot of grit and a lot of will, I got through it okay. And I slept pretty well for many years after that until there was a little bit of a plot twist. And that was a plot twist we collectively experienced March of 2020,
Mhm.
right when the pandemic started. For that first couple months, there was a lot of, uncertainty in the world, and we didn't
Yeah.
know what was going on. And my sleep started to suffer again, and I got really concerned. So I started to look to Google to, how to get better sleep. I bought myself an Aura ring to track my sleep, and I was able to get my sleep back on track pretty quickly.
Okay.
And I just got kind of excited about that. Like, wow, it wasn't that hard. I wasn't like rocket science. So I started sharing what I was doing on Facebook, just organically. It wasn't a business then. And I found out that a lot of other people in my circle were struggling with sleep too, and were appreciative of the things that I was sharing. And so it was late in 2020 that I had this really powerful revelation. And that was, Morgan, you need to be a sleep coach and help other women with their sleep. So, and just to kind of backtrack by a couple of years, and in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay.
And that was a really pivotal time in my life because it got me thinking about my my journey, my passion, what I wanted to do to help other people.
Yeah.
And that was really helping people get healthier. But at
Mm.
that time, I didn't really know how that would actually play out. And then when
Yeah.
I found this fascination with sleep, it was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I can actually help people. So I decided, okay, I'm going to be a sleep coach. Well, that's awesome. But like, you don't just like hang up your shingle and be like, I'm this. You
Yeah.
have to like learn about it. You have to, get qualified. So I enrolled in some health coaching and sleep coaching certification programs. Took a year to really delve into the science of sleep. And then in 2021, launched my sleep coaching practice. So that's kind of how I got into this field. And it's been quite a ride. It's been amazing, actually.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you pinpointed how this collective uncertainty can have an impact on us all, right? Because I feel like we're kind of there again. We
Mhm.
made it through the pandemic, but right now there's a lot of uncertainty in the world,
Yeah.
especially if you live in our country, we have our own, other countries have a lot of uncertainty going on. We just don't know necessarily what we might be facing in the near future. And so, right now, there may be people going through the same thing that you went through of not being able to sleep well at night, of, you know, having all of the thoughts in your mind. Like I try to avoid the news. I get whatever information I need to have, but I don't allow myself to really sit and absorb it. But it's really hard to not, have some concerns or have some fears or have some worries, and that can keep us up at night. So, for people who are maybe at the point where they're realizing, oh, I need to do something or I need to get some sleep or they're struggling, based on your experience, your personal experience, and what you've trained in, what do you recommend? Because so many people they may just be going to their doctors and getting sleeping pills. I know there's other ways to set yourself up for rest. Like, what would be
Yeah.
your advice for someone in
Yeah.
that place?
There's so many things we can do, but when I'm first starting to work with somebody or giving people counsel, I really say start with strengthening your circadian rhythm to get
Mm.
better sleep because good sleep is actually an output of a strong circadian rhythm.
Can you
And
explain what a circadian rhythm is for those who may
sure,
not know?
absolutely. So you can think of your circadian rhythm as your 24-hour body clock. And we have something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our circadian pacemaker. And that is sort of supposed to be syncing up with all of these other little tinier circadian clocks all over our body within every cell. And what we really need to do is get everything synced up. And primarily what is driving the circadian rhythm and keeping that going is light primarily. And there's some other things too, but what I really help people focus in on when they're beginning their sleep optimization journey is getting those circadian rhythms synced up. And so there are a few ways to do that. And really, the most basic way that I think is accessible to everybody for the most part is starting off getting morning light every morning, whether or not it's sunny or cloudy. People will say to me, "Oh, the sun's, there's really no sun out." Well, there is sun. It's not as intense.
Yeah.
So what I recommend for people to do to keep their circadian rhythm really going strong is after they wake up, get outside first thing and expose yourself to light for about 10 minutes. Doesn't take that long. You don't want to wear any glasses though. People a lot of times will go outside and wear their sunglasses. And the problem with that is the glasses actually keep the light from hitting your retina. So your eyes have to have that trigger that
Hmm.
sends a signal to your suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there are these really beautiful triggers of neurotransmitters and hormones going off. So, for example, any melatonin from the night before is shut off. Your cortisol boosts naturally. Melatonin for the next night gets prepared. So there's a lot of really good things happening. And people will lose those benefits if they put on sunglasses. So that's just kind of something to think about. Another thing is having a consistent wake up time every morning, right? That's another thing that really keeps your circadian rhythm strong. And we talk a lot about this consistency of our sleep wake times. It's a lot easier to have a consistent wake time, or excuse me, a consistent bedtime when you have a consistent wake time.
Yeah.
Because after you've been awake for about 16 hours or so, you begin to accumulate this sleepy chemical called adenosine. And that adenosine has to be released through sleep. So just by virtue of that very consistent wake up time, you're going to become sleepy around the same time each night. So that kind of gets your regularity happening. And then also one other thing that I would definitely urge people to do for their circadian rhythm, also as well as building that sleep drive, is exercise. And
Yeah.
you don't have to go really intense. What I recommend is 30 minutes 5 days a week. And there's been so much data supporting this in the literature. And exercising does not have to cost money. I mean, you could just go outside and walk, or you could run if your knees can handle running.
Yeah.
Good for you. Mine can't. But yeah, just moderate exercise. So those are really sort of like the three main things that I would. Oh, and then there's another one that I forgot. And it goes back to the circadian rhythm, is timing your meals regularly. So
Hmm.
I mentioned light as a very powerful circadian cue. It's called a Zeitgeber, which is means time giver. And our meal regularity is also one of those time givers. So if you can kind of commit to eating your 3 meals at regular intervals, within an hour of, so have breakfast from 8 to 9,
Hmm.
lunch from 12 to 1, and dinner from 6 to 7, that's
Yeah.
just as an example. And, there are times, of course, when our schedules get out of whack. We have, kids games, and those run late, and we have dinner dates, and those may run late. And not to get too been out of shape about that, but for the
Yeah.
most part, just keeping that regularity with your meals is very, very helpful.
Yeah, having some of the flexibility for the lived experiences and life experiences that come up, but when it's all over the place, it's very hard for our systems to regulate. And I love that because I study Ayurveda. I'm certified in Ayurveda, and I think a lot about our connection with nature, right? And so what this really is like taking us back to our connection with nature and the earth before we created artificial light, before we created artificial circumstances. When the sun came up, that's when we could get up and do our work. And that's when we ate our biggest meal in the middle of the day. When the sun went down, we all prepared to rest. We didn't have a world where light was available 24/7 and this artificial light, and just kind of made us feel like we don't need sleep, right?
Right,
And the
right.
whole mantra of like, oh, sleep when I die. I
Yeah.
can I can work all day now, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, that's like nails on a chalkboard to me. But yeah, you're right. You're so right. We actually, according to a 2001 study, we spend 93% of our time indoors or in our car.
Mm.
All right. So I really think that if you did that study now in 2025, post pandemic, more people are working from home. We have a lot of just things at our disposal, DoorDash. I mean, like you could like not have to leave your house at all. I would say we're probably spending even more time inside. And you're right. Like our ancestors were only able to do things during the day. Like you couldn't just like have a snack at 10 p.m. like
Yeah.
we do now.
Yeah.
So basically what's happened is the light dark patterns that were conducive to our ancestors have been flipped on their head now.
Hmm.
So instead of having bright days and dark nights, we're having dim days and bright nights. And we really need to start working on shifting that so that we're getting a lot of bright light during the day and we're really honoring the darkness at night.
Yeah. And I've also learned how important it is not to eat right before you go to sleep. When I
Oh,
started
yes.
understanding my digestive system and how our body works and how to even stay well, especially when things are happening like the pandemic or flu season, like in order to keep our immune systems well, in order for our bodies to be able to replenish and turn over cells and do the cleanup it needs to do at night, like we have to be done digesting or all of our energy is going there. So if we're eating at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then we're only sleeping a few hours, we never actually get to that cleanup part.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that because there are, I think a lot of people just have out of habit this like late night snacking kind of thing. Like they
Mhm.
turn on the TV and then they just have their snack. They're not even really cognizant of what's going on. And so I'm really always trying to get my clients to think about their meal timing, like when
Mhm.
they stop eating dinner. And ideally, you want to stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. I mean, I
Yeah.
think even if you could get to 4 hours before bed, that's even better. I mean, I've personally done experiments on myself where I will kind of test that out. And I feel like if I can get 4 to 5 hours in of time between my last bite and bed, my sleep is just a lot deeper. The quality is better. So that's just something I'm glad you brought that up because there are a lot of people who are just eating way too late, snacking and all
Yeah.
that just mindlessly.
Yeah, many times it's just habit, like, we're not even hungry, right? It's just like
Yeah.
we've habit stacked the bad things, like,
Right.
"Oh, Netflix and snacks at night,"
Right.
and so it
Exactly.
just becomes like, something we just do, like you said,
Yeah.
mindlessly.
Yeah.
So tell me about I've been hearing a lot about, sleep trackers. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about, like, what does that really mean? Is it useful? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I have a sleep tracker, and well, in fact, I have three, but who's counting, right? It's my job, right? So
Yeah.
I get a pass on that. So I think there's a good side and a bad side to sleep trackers. I think for somebody who is interested in optimizing their sleep, getting it to a better place, sleep trackers can be useful. Now, although you have to think about the fact that like you're getting all this data from your sleep tracker, are you going to do something with that data,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the question. So you could have all this data, not even look at the score, not even pay attention. So what's the point of getting the sleep tracker anyway? You have to really be willing to kind of play detective and
Mhm.
look at the data. And most of the sleep trackers in this day of AI, there's usually some kind of embedded coach in it that kind of gives you a little bit of guidance on what's going on.
Can you give a few examples of some sleep trackers for people who may not know
Sure.
what the
Sure.
technology is? Yeah.
So the Aura Ring, I think, is probably the gold standard as far as sleep tracking and being accurate in their metrics. So it's measuring things like what time you sleep, what time you wake, your deep sleep, your light sleep, your REM sleep. It's measuring your sleep efficiency, which is basically the percentage of time that you're actually asleep while you're in bed. You're aiming to get sleep efficiency to be 85% or higher. Um, it also measures readiness, which is heart rate variability, heart rate, breath rate, temperature. So that's the Aura Ring is really kind of the gold standard, but there's also the Whoop band, which I have as well. I love it. The Whoop band, for me, I'm using it more for fitness tracking and stress
Okay.
management, but it does track sleep. There's also the Apple Watch. there's Fitbit. Those are the main players, in the sleep tracking category. And so, again, I recommend them for people who are able to look at the data and then make behavioral changes based on what they see. The downside of the sleep trackers is that a lot of times people can get more anxious about their sleep. There's something
Mm.
called orthosomnia, and that's basically being a little bit too hypervigilant about the data and reactionary. So in my work, I'm mainly seeing people who have insomnia, and tied with insomnia is often quite a bit of sleep anxiety. And so for someone who has insomnia, I have found that the sleep trackers can actually backfire, and that it makes people more anxious about their sleep. They get more um, reactive about the details. So I don't always recommend that people with insomnia who are actively working to fix their insomnia wear them. There's also something I call it the middle ground approach, and this is sort of like a hybrid. So quite often people will look at their data every morning. I'm one of those people. I just kind of like it. It's kind of a fun part of my
Hmm.
morning.
Yeah.
I'm a data geek.
Yeah.
But there's also the approach of taking a step back and looking at your data weekly. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
Saturday or Sunday morning, looking at the week and noticing the trends versus getting really caught up in the headlines of each day of looking. So that's another approach for people who are starting to get a little bit too attached to their data. And then one thing that I should note is that really at the end of the day, what matters most is how you feel about your sleep. Like, how do you subjectively feel you slept?
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't match what the sleep tracker says. And they've done studies where, for example, they've told people who slept well, they said, oh, your sleep score is not good. Right. And so that person starts to create behaviors to reinforce the negative sleep.
Mm.
So it's almost like it really is what you feel, how you feel you slept is really going to be the main driver, right?
Yeah.
Your main barometer of your sleep is how you feel about it versus what the data tells you. Because honestly, the data sometimes can be weird. I mean,
Yeah.
my sister, for this is a real life example. She sent me a screenshot of her Whoop score this morning. And she's like, what's this about? It says I only needed 3 hours of sleep last night. And I'm like, they're totally wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, contact support. They're totally wrong. You know, obviously, like her sleep need is not 3 hours a night, right? So
Right.
there's room for error with these things,
Yeah.
for
Well, and
sure.
I love that because like at the end of the day with all things, we need to check in with ourselves, right? Like nobody
Sure.
knows ourselves better than ourselves. Like it's great
Yeah.
to have these tools or have coaches or have things that can help be mirrors and reflect us back or give us things to think about or respond to. But we also have to listen to our body because our body knows and our body will tell us, and it tells us in many different ways. There's so many times I look back in when I thought I was feeling okay, it's like, oh, but I always had like maybe a slight headache or aches and pains, or I had to feel like I had to have caffeine in the afternoon, or like there's ways that our body talks to us, but we get so caught up on ignoring our body, right? And so, and thinking about that, is there like a difference or is there something people should think about for like there's people who have a hard time falling asleep and then maybe they do and they stay asleep all night and there's some people who can fall asleep and then they wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep. I know there's like a lot of different types of sleep disturbances or challenges that people have with sleep. How should someone be thinking about that information for themselves and kind of listening to their body based on what's happening?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the main two sleep complaints. And really what I see most often is people complaining about waking up in the middle of the night. That seems to be a bigger complaint. And, I was taught something in my training with sleep that is a generality, but I think it's worth mentioning is they said that for the most part, when people have trouble falling asleep, it tends to be more of a psychological thing,
Mm.
more anxiety, you know, less, I guess, calm calm in the evening. They're just wound
Yeah.
up too tight
Brain
or
won't turn
whatever.
off. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the busy brain.
Hmm.
And whereas they said the middle of the night awakenings can be more indicative of physical problems.
Mm.
So that would be like sleep apnea,
Mhm.
blood sugar dips,
Mhm.
um, maybe like stomach issues, like parasites or something like that. Now, I have actually seen that play out in my practice, but it's not a hard and fast rule. It's sort of
Right.
like a quick assessment.
Mhm.
But generally, what I urge people to do, for regardless of their sleep issue, is really pay attention to their environment and like do a bedroom audit, if you will. And really, when you think about our bedrooms, they should be a sleep sanctuary, right? And they should kind of resemble a cave in many ways. So
Mhm.
if you think about a cave, it's cool, dark, and
Yeah.
quiet, right? So quite often people will have their temperatures too high, right? And so they that when the temperature gets too high, it tends to make us, a little bit overheated. We might wake up sweating, and we actually need our core body temperature to be a couple of degrees lower to initiate and maintain sleep. So I always ask my clients about, what temperature are you falling asleep to?
Mhm.
And generally there's no one magic number really, but we're aiming like mid 60s to upper 60s is sort of like the sweet spot for most people. Some people like it even colder than that. I prefer 68. That's kind
Yeah.
of where I like to land.
Yeah.
So, keeping it cool, keeping the room dark. So, really making sure that you don't have a lot of light coming in from the outside. Blackout shades and curtains are a good idea. If those are out of reach, sometimes those can be a little expensive. Just an eye mask will really help block
Mhm.
out the light. Um, Quite often, people will have some appliances in their bedroom, or maybe they have a computer or some kind of electronic device that has like a bright blue light. You can just easily tape those up with electrical tape, or they've got these things called junk light dots that you can just kind of press on and kind of mind those types of obnoxious lights.
Yeah.
And then having the room quiet. Like it's hard to keep a quiet room if you have maybe city noise in the
Yeah.
background. We live in different environments. I have clients who live in a rural environment. Noise is not a problem, but if you're in the city, somewhere busier, you might hear sirens at night. And even if you have like a quiet neighborhood, if you've got kids or pets,
Yeah.
well, you can't really
Yeah.
control for that. So a lot of times people will sleep with white noise or some kind of music in the background, kind of looping. So that's a way to kind of block out the noise. And then there's earplugs. And when I talk about earplugs, sometimes I'll have moms say, "Well, I got to hear the kids,"
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
sometimes what you can do is just put one earplug in, right, and have the exposed ear like up away
Yeah.
from you, and so that you can kind of hear. So that's just really kind of how I like to look at the bedroom, is really just like the sanctuary, like the cave, really not having clutter around.
Mhm.
Not, I mean, preferably no TV. That's a difficult one, because if you're in a partnership, sometimes someone wants
Yeah.
the TV in the bedroom, and that can be a little bit of a negotiation point. But just kind of keeping a chill bedroom, like literally, literally, and not so literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I really feel like that made a huge difference in my sleep quality. So I haven't had a TV in my bedroom in over a decade or more. Um, because when I had a health crisis and I got really sick and I started really figuring out all the ways to be as well as possible, like, and sleep was the cornerstone of that, right? Like I knew I needed to rest to recover. So like I don't sleep with my phone in my room. I sleep with it in the bathroom. I can still hear it. I'm one of those like moms, like my kids are grown, but I'm a caretaker to my mother. So it's like I have to hear. So I put it in the bathroom so I'm not like getting the disturbance from it, just being next to my bed. I do sleep with like a sleep mask. I also tape my mouth. Um,
Yeah.
in those little, and like you're talking about like those little, like when I travel, even sometimes with my sleep mask on, I like the little lights in the hotel rooms. They never used to
Yes.
bother me when I used to business travel all the time and I didn't sleep well anyway, but now it's like almost like they're painful. It's like, oh, they seem so bright and you don't think about it until you've actually started to get some good sleep and then you get put
Yeah.
back in environments that make it harder. to what you're
Yes,
used to. And then you realize, like, oh, all these things actually do make a difference.
they do. Yeah, and when you travel, if you can just kind of keep um, a thing of black masking tape or
Mm,
electrical
hmm.
tape, I think it's what it's called, in your suitcase. So that
Yeah.
way you never have to remember to pack it. That has been a lifesaver for me. I just keep it in my cosmetic case. It looks
Yeah.
kind of odd, like black electrical tape in my cosmetics case, but it's been a game changer because if you travel and you go to Airbnbs, those aren't as consistent as hotels. Hotels tend to have a little bit more of a kind of a standardized way these
Yeah.
days of like preventing the light from being from shining on you. But it's been very helpful, and I sleep with mouth tape as well. I really like that.
Yeah.
There's not everyone should be doing it, but I think the main thing is with mouth tape, you want to make sure that you've been screened for sleep apnea
Yeah.
and that you don't have that because that can sometimes exacerbate sleep apnea. But it's a great way to kind of get your parasympathetic system kicking into better gear.
Hmm.
I like it.
Yeah. And um, for anybody who's more interested, just kind of even learning why, the book Breath by James Nestor is a really good one, to kind of just
Yeah.
learn the power of your breath, especially when it comes to sleep.
Yes. Great book.
Yes. Yes. So, can we talk a little bit more about what are some additional kind of things people could start today? Like, 'cause there's a lot of little tips that you
Yeah.
talked about in ways to
Yeah.
kind of set up your environment and kind of figure out where you are with your sleep. But for someone who just is struggling and they just need those little tiny steps to start, like what are the things you recommend first to
Sure.
kind of get on the journey?
Yeah. I think that something that can be very, very helpful is looking at the bookends of your day. So really kind of auditing your morning and your evening. I think a lot of times people will put too much emphasis on the evening routine. Like they'll just like really dial it in. They'll just
Hmm.
like almost to the point where they've overscheduled their evening routine to make it like really regimented. And
Hmm.
that can sometimes backfire. But like, let's just start with the morning because I think a lot of people ignore the morning as part of their sleep routine. And actually, good sleep starts the moment your feet hit the floor.
Yeah.
And there's a quote by Louise Hay: how you start your day is how you live your day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a real big believer in establishing some kind of morning routine with intentionality built into it. And that can look very different for people, according to like what your daily life looks like. If whether you've got several kids or you're retired or you're a student and you don't have any responsibilities, but really thinking about just having some kind of grounding practice, whether that's 5 minutes or a half hour, whatever
Hmm.
time you have to give, but really just centering yourself, um, thinking about your day, setting intentions. If you are starting your day like rushing around, like putting out fires, what you notice often is that your day just kind of snowballs into even
Yeah.
more chaos, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
really just kind of setting the tone for the day in the morning, I think is really helpful. And then at the end of the day, with the bookends of the day, I think a lot of times people will well, if there's something called revenge bedtime procrastination. Have you heard of this
Oh,
term
I've never
before?
heard that
Yeah.
term.
It's a term that got used a lot around the pandemic, but the term was actually coined years before that. And basically what this is, it's when people intentionally blow off their bedtimes in favor of doing something that is for their own enjoyment, like
Mm.
Netflixing
Mhm,
or maybe
mhm,
drinking wine while you're
mhm,
Netflixing.
mhm.
And it tends to be something that is done more often by busy professionals, especially moms, because as women, I think, as professionals, and especially if you have kids, you're doing things for other people all day long, right? And so quite often the things that you want to do get pushed aside in lieu
Yeah,
of something that your boss wants or your kids need that. And so it's sort of like the mom is sort of like, okay, I know my bedtime and I know I should be in bed by 10, but screw it. I'm going to watch my show and have
yeah,
popcorn and wine.
Yeah.
No, and they know it's totally not insomnia. Like
Right.
it's they are capable of sleeping, but they're choosing to actually blow off their bedtime in lieu of. It's kind of like the rebellious teenager coming out.
Hmm.
Like, I can stay up.
Yeah.
I'm a grown up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But and the reality is if you're doing it on the regular, you are going to be kind of low grade sleep deprived over a period of
Hmm.
time, right? And that's going to impact like your whole life, your
Yeah.
job, your relationships. So, what I usually recommend for people to do when they're in that cycle is take stock of like, why do you want to sleep better? Like, what do you like? Think about what you're going to get from actually
Hmm.
prioritizing your sleep. Like, what's going to be better for you? And then thinking about that really deeply. Also, doing things during the day that bring you joy, right? Instead
Yes.
of procrastinating all of that stuff into the evening, like even if you're taking your calendar and you're doing a few time blocks every day of 10 minutes a day, or 10 minutes 3 times a day,
Hmm.
which is doable if you think about it. Everyone's
Yeah.
got 10 minutes in pockets of their day to do something that they like, whether that's maybe it's watching cat videos on YouTube. Who cares?
Hmm.
Like, it's
Right.
something that
Right.
you enjoy doing, right? So you
Yeah.
do that. That way you're less prone to kind of binging on whatever that is later after you should be going to bed. And then also creating some kind of like timer on your phone, like setting an alarm. We often, have an alarm for bed to get us up in the morning, like
Hmm.
wake up. But we need to actually, a lot of us need to have an alarm to notify us that it's time to wind down.
Yeah.
And I always recommend at least a half hour of wind down time. I mean, an hour is ideal, but like we all have different
Yep.
schedules
Hmm.
where you're decompressing.
Hmm.
You're not taking any new information in. You're reducing any kind of novelty into your day. If you're watching TV, like people are like mind blown sometimes. I'm a sleep coach, and my wind down activity is TV. They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay. If you're watching something that's not going to be overly stimulating
Yeah.
or frightening, TV can be a great practice. If you're like comedies and
Yeah.
documentaries
Yeah.
about food or travel, things that are just not going to rile you up, those can be great. And of course, like, you want to be mindful of your light environment at night.
Yep.
Like, you don't want to have the bright lights overhead while you're watching TV. You want to have ideally blue blocking glasses on if you're in front of the screens at night. But yeah, just being mindful of just carving out a little bit of wind down time can make a world of difference.
Yeah. I'm definitely an advocate of that. When I'm coaching my clients, I call our bookends sacred brackets, right? Because so many of the people that I coach are busy professionals, parents. Like, we have all the things, right? We've built up all the things that we feel responsible for and do all day. And so we so often say, I don't have time for the things for me. I don't have time. And like, the two times that you can control no matter what happens in your life is when you open your eyes and right before you close your eyes, right? Even if you have small children, like, the baby can cry for a couple of minutes for you to lay there and take a few breaths and check in with yourself and slowly ease out of bed, right? There's so many different ways that you, like you said, it doesn't have to be a long time. It's great to build up to a long time. Like, I definitely have at least an hour of wind down time. I love to read at night, and I have like 2 hours to myself in the morning before anybody else gets any of my time. And that's me doing all the things that I want to do for myself, whether it's my spirituality practice, my movement practice, whether it's me getting organized for the day, making an actual breakfast and sitting down and eating it before I like jump into everybody else's stuff. Because not only does your day snowball from chaos, but it snowballs from doing things for everyone else but yourself. And so I really think that that is a great practice for rest and just overall well-being. And I love
Yeah.
like the joy slots, right? Like, we deserve
Yeah.
joy. We
Of
deserve to
course.
enjoy our day. Like, that life only happens in the days. And so I'm always telling people, figure out how to design your ideal day and let that be your North Star, not all these external societal titles and salary. Like, if you understand how you want to live your life and you start to design towards that, and we aren't ever going to live our ideal day every day, but it helps us make decisions on how we spend our days when we know what's best for us and what we're really striving towards.
Yeah. I love that. So well said.
Yeah, yeah. And so I believe you have a free guide that people can can get to help them start their sleep journey?
Yes, my guide is really designed around the biggest sleep complaint that my clients have, and that's the 3 a.m. wake up. It is just a thorn in so many people's sides. So I started to think about, putting this together for people. It really kind of helps you troubleshoot like what's going on, what could be done about it, why it's happening, how to manage it. And so it's a free resource on my website if anyone wants to download it. It's a great start if you're struggling with those wake ups, which so many people are, especially as we get older and our sleep becomes more fragmented and our circadian rhythm
Yes.
starts to shift. It's just you
Yes.
see more of those middle of the night wake ups as we get older.
Yeah, especially when you're like my age and going through perimenopause and
Yes.
your body's like, "Wait a minute, everything's changing." So
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly.
definitely it's a topic of conversation for me and my friends on a regular
Oh
basis.
yeah.
So we'll definitely put the link for that in the show notes. So before we wrap up, I do have a few fun questions I like to ask everyone just to help us all get to know each other a little better because I
Yeah,
feel like, building community is really important, especially in this time right now.
of
So my
course.
first question is, what's currently your favorite part of the day?
Well, it's a tie between sitting down in my cozy chair with my morning coffee and doing my little morning routine, or my nighttime TV watching with my husband and my two
Mhm.
little pups on the couch.
Oh,
Those are both like really joyful parts of my day. So it's depending on which day you ask me, I'm going to answer one or the other, but it's the bookends
I
cream.
love that. Kind of ties it together. And that
Yeah.
leads into my next question. So this might make you have to choose one of those times because what's your favorite current cozy?
Okay, so a couple months ago, I discovered fuzzy socks for sleeping.
Mm.
I didn't just discover it, I had worn them on and off, but I'd been getting the cheap ones from Amazon. And I was listening to this podcast with a woman, a midlife influencer person who was doing like a holiday gift guide. And she
Mhm.
mentioned these socks from, I'm going to say the company, no affiliation.
Yeah.
Um,
No sponsorships. This is just
they're
sharing good things. Yeah.
Barefoot Dreams, I think is the
Barefoot
name of it.
dreams.
Barefoot Dreams. And she kept going on and on about these socks. I'm like, okay, I've got to get these socks. I mean, it's like they hung the moon or something. And yeah, they're next level. They're real fuzzy, and I just love putting them on at night. I kind of like even put on like heel cream to like soothe the
Hmm.
cracked heels. It's super sexy, of
Yeah.
course.
It's like a little self-care treatment. Yeah.
So yeah, fuzzy socks at night. That's my newest cozy.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check those out. I love all things cozy. So do you have a current go-to feel-good song?
Yeah, there's a song that comes on my playlists every now and then called "Lovely Day." I think the guy's Bill Withers. It's a
Mhm.
song from the '70s. I'm not like a
Mhm.
big older music kind of fan, but it's just like such a pleasant song. Like
Yeah.
it's so just like, okay, you feel good when you listen to it. It's
That's a good
nice.
one. I know exactly what
Yeah.
song you're talking about, and it's a really good feel good,
Yeah.
bring you into the right kind of energy
Yes.
song. Yes. So we've talked a lot about like well-being things and rest things, but I'd like to know like what's one thing that you do right now for your 80-year-old self?
Lift weights.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've been very, very diligent about doing that over the past several years. Just because I'm learning so much about how muscle is protective for us as we age, and
Mhm.
I do not want to be a frail old lady.
Yeah.
I want to be, if I fall on my butt, I want to be able to get up without
Mhm.
calling for help. I want to be able to carry my own groceries.
Yep.
So I'm just, even though I don't love it every day, I'm after it. I'm lifting the weights, and I'm thinking about my older self while
Yeah.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And there's a difference, right? It's interesting when I took yoga teacher training, I had people in my class who were in their 70s and 80s taking yoga teacher training just for fun, and they have done it before. And so they're like on the floor doing all the poses, studying with us. But then I'd come home to take care of my mother, who's the same age, who could barely has any mobility at this point. And I realized like, oh, it's a choice, and it starts now, like at this
Yes.
age, to determine your
Yes.
quality of life. Then, so
So true.
I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, last question is, how do you remember to live?
I think by slowing down and noticing the simple moments that bring you joy, right? I
Mm.
think that when I was younger, I was always focusing on like the next big trip.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
always had to have a big trip on my calendar. Or maybe it was like, back when I was in pharmaceutical sales, I would get these massive bonus checks, right?
Mhm.
And I would go out and buy like a really expensive handbag.
Mhm.
Guess where those handbags are now? They've been consigned.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't give a crap about those. Like I'm just like, observing my beautiful dog or
Mhm.
just holding hands with my husband while we walk. It's like
Mm.
those like very simple, they're free moments that I just like think about and look forward to and just
Yeah.
really cherish. And it's just the slowed down moments
Yeah.
I think are the most meaningful.
Yeah. The magic in the everyday moments that we take for granted until we can't have them anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you, Morgan, so much. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on my website, morganadamswellness.com. You can get that free guide. And I'm on Instagram somewhat, but I'm on LinkedIn more. That's how we
Yeah.
met. And
Yeah.
I found LinkedIn to be an awesome place to connect with cool people like
It
yourself.
is. It is. I
So
have a
like,
whole LinkedIn
yeah,
community. Like, I love
yeah, it's
LinkedIn.
it's
Yeah.
really like an underrated social platform. So you can find me there. Like I'd love to connect with people who are like-minded and doing cool things in the world.
Awesome. Well, we will put all those links in the show notes so people can connect with you. Thank you again for sharing all of your tips and perfect ideas for us. And I believe this is National Sleep Month. Is that
It
right?
is. It's Sleep Awareness
Sleep
Month.
Awareness Month.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
March.
So
That's it.
perfect timing for us all to take a look at our sleep
Yeah.
and do things to help us get a little bit better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.